So obviously, we're going to look at what students said about how they receive feedback, the mechanisms for feedback, and also the instructor's preference and how those matched or didn't match. As well, I'm hoping that we will be able to cover a narrative thread of the tasks that I've chosen to highlight here, and the implications for the range of tasks that can be done at higher CLB levels, and also a narrative thread on inter-rater reliability in assessing CLB 7 to 9 writing. Yeah, so there are different points that you can jump in, and there's time to discuss at the end. All right, so the learning context, I want to get that out of the way immediately because I find sometimes that the context is quite different, and I need to get a couple minutes to get my head around the teaching learning context of somebody else's environment. So here I'm at BCC, and this particular program is for BC professionals who have signed up because they want to better integrate, or they want to upgrade their skills, possibly because they've figured that out themselves, or possibly because of a workplace situation where they've been told they would have opportunities, or they've been told that if they wanted to continue, they'd need to upgrade their skills. Or sometimes they come to us because they have applied for a program and they didn't even know that they were ESL anymore, and they were surprised to find that they had to take some classes. All right, so this was a blended environment. There's listening and speaking as well, but this particular workshop is on writing. The reading and the writing were connected, but the reading was online. So I only see the learners 5 hours a week in a face-to-face environment, and there's a lot of homework. And they become very proficient at using a Moodle environment, and they also start off doing shared materials and individual assignments in Google. So what we're going to look at is also the uptake on the part of the learners on how they become proficient in these technologically mediated environments. And that is one of the outcomes of the course, is that it is for professionals who could jump into a learning or workplace context and not be flummoxed by the expectations that come there. And this particular part is about writing. Okay. It was multi-level, CLB 7 to 9, but the focus is not level-based. The focus was on rotating modules, and the modules were based on professional, technical, and business contexts. And the courses are articulated to other BC programs and within the college, and they have both CLB levels and grades. All right. Okay, just ignore my nervousness here. All right. I've mentioned this a bit, but we're to give you a chance to focus in on this. We're looking at the learners' comments and their experiences about writing in computer-mediated environments. When they come in, they've already said that they have computer literacy, that they can download and upload and save documents. We find that there's a great deal of interpretation in that, and often professionals from other countries may have had someone who did most of the typing and most of the document creation for them, and that they're not as savvy as they may think they are, or they don't realize the importance of being able to type accurately. So you get situations where people have got a lot of learning and practice to do in order to come out successfully. So that is one of the outcomes of the program, and you'll see this is a thread through this presentation as well. We've talked about the feedback, and I also will talk about instructor's preference and the ease of classroom management, the amount of time spent on marking, and on preferences for the accountability to the students and to the system. What that means, that's the post-secondary system in which they are enrolled. And again, the narratives that I have on the side, which is to be able to talk about the tasks, the levels, interrelatability in assessment. Okay, here we are. So first off, we start with some classroom writing. Let's say we've got a group of 20, so it's a large group. The classrooms are held in a lab setting, so they are instantly working on a computer. There's very little pen and paper work, possibly one assignment a term, a practice and an assessed assignment, possibly a form where we're looking at their handwriting, their conventions, their cursive writing, but generally all assignments are typed. So starting off with working in a classroom environment in a lab, working with a Google Doc, we found that to be a really easy way to give simultaneous feedback to the learners. So having them create a Google account, sharing that account with a small group and with their instructor, and forgive me if I'm just talking the absolute obvious here for most people, but in case people haven't used this, I'm going to just walk us through it. So they create their document, they share it with their instructor. I can be at a console, an instructor console, and I can be instantly typing in comments or questions into their shared document. So initially they think this is very cool and they're getting instant feedback. And it's also allowing the more proficient typists or the more experienced learners or the returning students or people who feel comfortable jumping in, being able to take a task and produce something, and a less experienced learner or a lower level student or a slower typist can participate as a third member of the group. Another agenda here is that when I've got 20 students and I've put them in a group of 3 initially, they feel like they're getting feedback, but I'm not marking to the same extent. So the feedback is instantaneous, it's meaningful, and it's not a lot of marking I'm taking home, or basically any. All right. So that's one of the questions that the students had on a survey, was what they thought of that, the feedback that was given through that. There are other mechanisms to do that, but we found we are moving as much as possible into a Moodle environment, but this is something that Moodle doesn't allow us to do. So there are other platforms and applications that do this, but we use Google. Very easy. Okay, I am going to show you an example of that, and I'll let you know that the files were not in the order I uploaded, so I may have to go a little bit slow at some point. So here we are. This is a very typical document. The modules that I've pulled these ones out of are report writing, so this is short reports. You'll also see some from instructions, directions, procedures, and policy. And those are the particular tasks that I'm including in this workshop. You'll see this is an accident report. I did one in Tutela in the summer and in the fall, and for that I used letters and emails, and we covered a lot of pragmatic competence. And I did pull up a slide for in the end if people wanted to take a look at some examples of those. And if you've listened to Paul Holmes's presentation this morning, which was really great on pragmatic competence, that was something that I covered in the morning, in the summer. So you'll notice that these don't have a lot of pragmatic competence in these particular assignments that I've pulled up. Okay, so basically what I wanted to show here was just the fact that students can write in a group, they can take it home for homework, and they can be told, okay, it's time now for, you know, to do something, share it with a partner, and give it back to me. Okay, so from there, moving from that one, we also have something where I may give some homework, which is not a group assignment, but it's an individual assignment. And this was basically vocabulary taken from the module we're working on, asking students to identify terminology, collocations, idiomatic phrases that they come across that they feel they need to become comfortable using. And again, this was a great way for me to give them some feedback without a lot of work. I also wanted to point out that I use enabling skills as something that I work with the individual learners to identify the things that they are that they need to work on themselves. So one learner may be working on grammar, somebody else may be working on vocabulary. So I have a few that I expect them to do, but then they have some choice as well. So that was another activity. Okay. Here we go. Now, another enabling skill that we worked on was a goal setting chart. And that I'll show you, this is again one of those sidebars I talked about in having learners be responsible for their areas that they specifically needed to work on. And how I did this was early on in the session, I had them identify course goals that they could work on for the purpose of this particular session that we were with, and then I gave them feedback on this. So the difference here is instead of working in a Google environment, I worked with them to establish their goals by providing them with a downloadable document. So now they went to their Google, they downloaded a Word document, they saved it, they worked on it, and they then sent it back to me. So again, we're still working in a Google environment, but they are uploading and sharing with me. And the other thing, as I said, this is another narrative thread, was I come back to this. So they establish the goals, I come back to them in a couple of weeks. It's important to take class time or interview time, however that is set up in the program, to work with them. And this puts a lot of the responsibility on them and less of the responsibility on me. So this is very important in a multi-level class because I have to keep a very clear look at their outcomes that are for their level. They may be a little bit more confused about that initially because they're in a multi-level class. So there's different outcomes for different learners. So I provide them with the outcomes, I provide them with the rubrics, I provide them with an opportunity to do goals, and that helps them focus in on what they're trying to do for their level as opposed to what everybody else is trying to do. Okay, so moving now to the next slide, we'll see that moving from those Google assignments where they're just working with their vocabulary or the goal setting or something, we'll see that I found something really interesting occurred, and that was that they weren't as aware of conventions to do with formatting and spacing and indentation and titles and putting page numbers and whatnot on their documents when they were working in Google. Somehow it seemed to make a difference. So if I look at this one here, this is something that was created in Google, and this is a write-up now on goals. Again, this is in the first couple of weeks. And I thought, and it was really interesting. So one of the things that this person had to work on, but it was fairly standard, was just to be more aware of, you put a title and you put your name and you put your date and maybe the class that you're in, you put some spacing in your documents. So that was an interesting assignment, and as I moved them towards knowing how to do this in Word, it made it more, it made it easier for them to be able to use the conventions in Word to be able to produce standard-looking documents. That was one of the surprises that I found. Well, not entirely a surprise, but it did make a difference. Okay, so going back to the presentation, I go back to the presentation. There we go. Another thing we worked on was practice tests. So here, moving from Google to Moodle, and also from these group assignments that we first covered, plus these individual things they were doing in Google, now moving into understanding conventions that they can find in Microsoft Word to help them produce good-looking documents. Now we're moving into tests. So here I gave them a practice test, and this one was in Moodle. Moodle is our learning management system, and that also takes some getting used to. With that, I'll show you an example of a practice test that was an incident report here. And okay, so no, this one actually, they may have found the practice test in Moodle, but it looks like I put Word comments on this. One of the things I've noticed when working between Google and Word, I have a screenshot of this later in the presentation, is that in Word, you can just write the comment and it's there. And in Google, if you don't hit comment, as in it disappears. It's counterintuitive because usually anything in Google saves by itself. So you can be, yes, do I use feedback features in Moodle? Yes, absolutely. I'm going to come to that too, because that was one of the questions I gave the learners, is did they like the feedback as you see it here in a document? Or did they like these quick and really concise and to-the-point comments in Moodle? And that was a question that I gave them. So here is a practice test, and later you'll see, and I also give them the score on the rubric too. So one of the options was to give them the rubric filled in. So I've got a rubric, you'll see the rubric, and I've got a rubric, you'll see it, and I'm going to fit it to the slide there. There we go. All right. So I give them the rubric separately. Sometimes I would give them at the very beginning of the session, I would give them a couple rubrics where it's filled in, where they see the language of the rubric, they see my comment, and they see the score. I found that was quite time consuming, and so I did this short and dirty, well, not dirty, but this short form where I gave them just the title of the category of the rubric and the score of the rubric and my comment. And that was a choice I gave them in the survey, is did they like that or did they like the rubric itself filled in? Okay, so that was just, I use color coding, and I have one which is purple I use for sociocultural competencies or pragmatics. So the color coding tells them where they are, what kind of things they're working on. Okay, so if we move back to the presentation now, if it'll move back to the presentation. Here, in looking for a rewrite, one of the things I'm talking about here is the formative learning curve of the writing process. So I accept almost any number of rewrites. Usually it's not much work on my part past the first couple. And I want to show you a fun example of a learner who really, this is fairly typical, but it's a good example of someone who's gone to town and really tried really hard to make something ready for a conventional workplace setting where she's having to hand in a report. So this is in her field, And I try to, as much as possible, have tasks where there is some practical applicability to their lives in each of the modules. So this was a progress status report. So they all did this, and they did it in a test situation. And this was actually this was an assignment, not a test. And she was, this is what she produced in the end, which was quite a bit better than what she produced in the beginning. So by allowing for rewrites, she was able to walk away with something for her electronic portfolio that she was really, really happy with. And I have lots of examples of these. Okay, so moving back to the presentation, we've looked at informal learning and then tying that into assignments and tests. Okay. Oh, how many color categories do I use? Well, I'm bound by what looks good on the screen, depending on whether they're accessing it from a tablet or a computer. So I found red, of course, looks horrible, but it works because they can see that. And then I use about 4. So I use a different color for vocabulary. I use a third color when the phrasing is off, and then I use a lovely purple for pragmatics or sociocultural competencies when when it would be considered accurate in terms of vocabulary, but it just doesn't work in terms of what Canadians expect. So those are the colors that I use. All right, so this one here was an example of a early, well, it says a formative assessment on what we were working on the topic. Here we have someone, if we go to the second page, the students had to have a context. They had to give a set of instructions and directions and a context. So they were giving, this particular one was, we'll move to the third page, was giving a set of instructions on going to a building for international students who wanted to sign up for a course, what they needed to take, where they needed to go. They were given just bullets in a list, and they were given a map. So they had to interpret the map to provide the directions, and they provided the instructions, and also a set of instructions to get to a room, to get to a place where they could photocopy their documents. So I give comments on that, and I give them the mark on the rubric. And now I'm uploading it to the Moodle, where they can keep track of their progress and their assignments. So if we move to the next slide, move to H, and here I'm going to show you what it is that the learners see when they are looking at a Moodle environment. So as an instructor, I see this. I see the groupings, I see the different assignments, but they only see their own. So they go in, they see their assignment. Okay, I have I'm going to do a test on these instructions and directions and procedures. They open it up, they do it, it's timed. I leave it open so they can do corrections, although I may take away the prompt, and that's what they see. They'll also see whatever else I put up there. I put up a wiki for them to practice working on the next kind of report, which is a recommendation report. I also give them samples of other good reports so that they can collect everything in the Moodle environment. Okay, we're going to move to the next slide now. So we've seen a student sample of a test, and we've seen what the students see in Moodle. And now, mostly for fun, I'm just going to show you a test. And this is slide I. This is a higher level. So now we're moving to, okay, no, this is level 7 exit. So this is the incident report. So what I've done here is I have given them the instructions in Moodle. I also to be cautious, I always provide a sleeve of a paper, the paper version of this as well, especially if learners are nervous about, seeing the Moodle instruction, then they've got to create a Word document. I give them this on paper as well, initially anyways. So they're going to create a couple of reports, and then I give them a couple of links in this particular case. So I could use audio, I could use video, or as I said before, I've used a map or whatever. If we move to the next page, there's a second task, and here they had to do a progress report. And what I did, the way I did it here, was I controlled to some extent the tenses that I wanted them to use. So I wanted to say, okay, these ones have been started, or these tasks have not been started, or you've got some choice, and otherwise, yes, they have some choice, or they may not have started. So what I'm looking for, and this came up, I think it's going to come up in another presenter's presentation, is are they able to be flexible and accurate with their tenses, and are they able to use future, like future perfect, or I expect I will have finished, I hope I will have finished, by this date. So the successful writing samples, students were able to produce that. But even if they're writing very well, that's an area that we don't use very much in English, and that was, I found it a great assignment for being able to indicate to them whether they could be accurate in how they describe what they've done and what they expect to have done flexibly and accurately. So in this particular assignment, they had identified with a case manager or with a supervisor, I gave them a couple of choices, some tasks that they needed to become proficient at so that they could take over the next time this particular activity occurred. So they really liked that task as well, and it did do the job I wanted it to do, which was to see how accurate and how flexible they could be on a full range of English tenses. Instructions, procedures, and policy submission. And this is a level 2, a CLB 8 going to CLB 9. So again, we'll look at the next couple of pages on this as well. So here they were given a map, and again they were given bullets. Similar assignment as the earlier one on instructions, but more difficult, and there are 3 versions of this. So we'll take a look at the next page as well. They had to take a look at the bullets, they had to take a look at the map, and they had to write either to the patients at a lower level or to the staff. They had to suggest a series of procedures to speed up patient flow. And we can look at the 3rd page of this as well. And then they wrote a process. This particular one was in a process of documenting patient's flow. So they're given a card, which I'm hoping you will find, and they're given the card, they're given the task, they're given the map. So that was a way for me to pull all of these things together. And they did really well on it. It looks very hard, and you don't have the card in front of you, but they did very well on it. So there's a great deal of interpretation they have to do in order to be able to figure out what is the format for the documents that we need to produce. And so they've had a lot of practice with this, and they're producing good stuff, and I feel that they can go into a workplace later and be able to fit in. It's in a way, it's the written form of pragmatic competence, one aspect of it, which is knowing what you are expected to do and what the formatting should be. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. So these rubrics have been around for a while. They are likely going to be modified, and we're getting much more standardized in British Columbia. So there are rubrics that are coming out of PBLA and within the link context. that are really informative. These ones, as I said, have been used for a while, and the learner gets to see exactly what they're being assessed on. So this would be a CLB6. So in green here, I've highlighted what it is that that specific task is on. These match up with interacting with others, reproducing information, getting things done, and sharing information. So we can go to page 2 on this quickly. And so I can give them feedback on how they're doing it, and I show them initially what specifically we're working on. The additional features here may be something like bullets or inserting a table or something that is specific to that document that we're working on, but would not have a grade by itself. All right, so that's the level 6 exit. And in case you're wondering, why do we call it 6 exit rather than 7? There's been a lot of interpretation in BC and across the country on what those levels are. So this was, the learner comes in and they know they're a 6, but what we're doing, the assessment is actually at a 7. Okay, so I've shown you this one. If we want, I can share them later. You can see the other levels. I think for the purpose of time, I won't bother sharing with you the level 7 and 8. They have the same formatting. And it's going to be difficult to read the actual text itself. So let's take a look at, does anybody have any questions on the rubrics? This is a time I can stop. No, okay. So let's go on to a screen capture in slide M of how the comments look in Word once they are converted from Word to Google. This seems a bit of a non sequitur. We can go back to the original presentation as well, but I want to give us some time for comments at the end, so I'm going to skip moving on to the next slide. Okay, so after the assessments, I want to get to the learners' impressions of what they thought about the various ways that they got feedback. Okay, in the next slide, we will see their comments. So I'm actually going to start with the Word document versus the Google document. So what I did is I asked the students about 3 weeks before the end of the session, that asked them if they would fill out a survey that we would be doing on all the different ways that they received written feedback or audio feedback and what they thought of it. So I gave them a little bit of warning to think about this. And then if we move to slide M, I'll show you what they saw when they were getting a feedback in Word versus feedback in Google. And so, yeah, so here you are. So the comments in Google are very apparent, and it's very easy to give, just to refresh. Remember that sometimes they did it as a group assignment in class. Sometimes I gave them homework to submit as a group, small group, and sometimes they worked on their own. The Google work was mostly the enabling work. It was the goal setting, the vocabulary, the grammar development, work that was not counting for marks. And in that way, it was easy for all of us to separate out the collaborative, instantaneous work on Google versus the more of the assignments done in Word, although this was a similar thing done in two different ways. What was interesting is I didn't initially know that when the Google is converted to Word, you'll see that in the little bullet, in the little clouds, up on the upper left, up on the upper right corner of the Word document, that once you hit on that little blank bubble on the Word document, that will show the comment. But it looks fairly small and not apparent. But it is there, so it converts quite easily to Word. Here's a screen capture of what they see in Moodle. So what they see is they see their assignment. This says in small writing, forms with a report or an incident report. And then they see the grade, and then they see the comment. So what I also have done is I've uploaded their feedback document. So they do the test, they submit it, then I put those comments and those rubric scores into a document. I upload the document, and then I put a quick couple of comments into the Moodle so that when they scroll through this page as they're working through the 3-month session, they can really see how they're improving. So they see the assignment, they see the score, they see the comments, and then they need to download the document that I've given them. All right. Okay, and then I think there's a P, there's another P as well. If we have another P, we'll show that. Okay, where we're going to go now, yes, so this is a little bit of a better view of this. And I mean, not that you can read my comments, but they see the assignments, they see the score, and they see the comments. And here's a bit of a spoiler alert. When I gave my instructor viewpoint, I really liked this because to me it was I talked in the beginning about the accountability to the learner and the accountability to the system. For me to be able to go in here, I was able to see what moving over to the other side of the screen. Of course, I know what the assignments are, but I can also see whether they're taking into account my comments. So I might, if it's a small assignment, you see I've given them the comments right here, and I've given them the rubrics right here. So that might be for a practice assignment. Otherwise, they're uploaded more formally. Okay, so that was a preference for me because I was able to keep on top of how they were learning. But if we move now to the survey, let's see what the students said. Okay, if we move to slides Q and R, we're going to look at the surveys from the students. And I was quite interested to see that, I'm going to show you the actual rankings, but audio feedback or face-to-face feedback was quite high. And I didn't upload the audio file for this presentation because you really didn't need to hear me talk. But I was, we focused here on written feedback, and I was quite surprised to see that the students actually liked the face-to-face or the audio feedback. So if we move now, so in this particular learner has said audio, comments beside the Moodle grades with the rubric scores at the bottom. So that's the slide that I just showed you where there was the bigger system picture. And then, but also interestingly enough, edits on Google Docs came up quite high as well. For this particular learner, the reviewing comments on the paper, which I showed you the color-coded comments, and I make the comments and I put them in the document and I color code them and I give them rubric scores at the bottom. Well, that was kind of in the middle. And then the rubric itself, where I fill it in and I give them the scores, was at the bottom. Okay, let's move to the last learner slide, slide R. And here's something that I found across the board, interestingly enough, that the learners who were on the higher level we're still on slide Q, but the learners on the higher level seem to appreciate the Moodle feedback, the comments on the papers more, and the students moving from 6 to 7 tended to put the face-to-face first. And I think that's because they didn't have the confidence as well in their writing, and they really needed that validation that they were getting the right correction or they were focusing on the right thing. Okay, so we may get slide R. And while that's coming up, I'm going to, yeah, okay. So this student said that the face-to-face feedback was focused here, and the instructor showed us which books and what online materials were suitable to move from our level. So our program built that time in, but as I said, I was really surprised to see that the face-to-face was predominantly the top choice. And again, that might be also because the session was multi-leveled, so this ability to focus in on what the learner needs and also to allow them to set their goals and work towards them was apparently appreciated by them and understood by them. Interesting also, audio feedback was right up at the top. And then the written feedback was sort of in the middle. This person included peer feedback as well at the bottom. But generally, people felt more commonly that the rubric was at the bottom. Although after this survey closed, I found that some students handed me in late surveys, and that the ones that came in late had said that they did appreciate the rubric. So it's hard to say, but I was surprised that face-to-face and audio were at the top and the rubric was generally at the bottom. Okay, moving to the next PowerPoint slide. I'll tell you what the learners' rankings were as we close up here. Face-to-face, audio feedback, the Moodle feedback, the comments on Word was generally third or fourth, and the rubric was at the bottom. And if we quickly move to the next slide, I'll tell you what, yeah, there we are. There's what we've just covered, and again, a reminder that all of this is in notes available afterwards. Looking at the instructor's feedback, preferences. Interestingly, face-to-face was not at the top at all, and I think that's because it has to be scheduled and time is needed, and the instructor chose the MS Word comments. Isn't that interesting? And I think that's because, of course, that's the time it takes. I showed you the color coding, and I showed you the, there was a bit of a disjunct between...
Excuse me, Cheryl, for interrupting. Can you hear us? I just need to be able to end your session in a moment.
And the instructor, in the next slide, seeing that there's the MS Word comment, the Moodle feedback, because that is really clear to everybody where the student is standing, whether they're improving, what their grade is, how they're responding to the comments, face-to-face and Google in the middle, moving to the other slide, and the recorded audio right at the bottom. So really interesting that the preferred means of feedback differed between the learners and the instructor. And there was opportunity for all of it. So if they wanted face-to-face, they booked the time. So it's not that they weren't getting the time, but it was just the interpretation of what was the most valuable. Okay, so there are, coming to the last slide, because we have to finish up here. I wanted to point out that things to keep in mind is the flexibility and the time it takes to get the learners to be able to be moving from Google to Word to Moodle. And as well, when we talk about face-to-face time, is there consulting time built into the program to give learners that opportunity, and also is progress required. That was one of the things that I found, that by almost requiring rewrites and really putting the learning onto the learner in terms of monitoring their goals, that it really helped. And also is instructor choice built into the picture. So really, there was a great range in how people preferred their feedback, which didn't match up with the amount of time that it took to give the feedback. All right, so thanks everybody.